When you're talking about selling your business and it's exiting, how do you know when it's time to go? We just touched on this, but we can go a little bit deeper. There's three ways to know it's time for your business to wrap up. One is that you are done, you're done. You're like, I'm done with this. Number two is that the community is done. We don't need it anymore. Thank you. And number three, which all these can be true at the same time, the community or the job itself is done. Mission accomplished. It is complete. So number one, you're done. Number two, the community's done. They don't need anymore. Number three, the job is done. You already completed the mission. When we had launched Cuddler um, several years ago, and it was me and my two co-founders, um, Charlie Williams and Jeff Kulak. Shout out to y'all. Hope you're doing wonderful. And I had joined as a third co-founder. We launched that summer of 2014, late summer, early fall. Within a week, we had 100,000 users and 10,000 folks that had completed a cuddle. So it's called Cuddler, which connected people for hugs. So at the time, we have to go back a little bit. There was Tinder and Grinder. They still exist, but they're kind of shells of what they used to be. And we decided to do a platonic version of that. It was a fantastic ride. We launched it, immediately took off. We're in the New York Post, which is getting ribbed, which is funny because actually it was a freelancer for the New York Post before. I was like, guys, why are you stabbing me in the back? But the the peak was between us being on the late night talk shows. If you do a Google search on Cuddler, Cuddlr, you'll see all the media that came out of it. But the peak was actually when we were on the cover of the Wall Street Journal about starting a cuddle economy. Again, you can learn about that at the newsletter at joindamon.me on when it's time to exit the business, today's newsletter. With that, we hit 250,000 downloads and a high number of users and engagement. And it was a moment shortly after Valentine's Day that following year, so several weeks after, where I was one of the early morning meetings. At the time, my eldest son was 10 months old, and I was the main one at home. And my partner at the time was actually had a traditional job. So, it's just me and him. So I had to wake up super early to go ahead and spend time um, doing the meetings and so forth. And had the early morning meeting with one of my co-founders, Charlie, and looked up. I looked him dead in the eye, and vice versa on Zoom or whatever we're using, probably Skype. It was before Zoom was hidden, and I was like, I think we're done. And he was like, Yeah, I think we did what we're supposed to do. The job was done. That's a case of you have to be really careful because sometimes when we go and do our business statements, where I've spoken at accelerators, I have good friends that run accelerators and or have been in accelerators. So I know how it works. You have the startup weekends and all that stuff, particularly now they're so popular. Shout out to all y'all. I won't even start to name y'all because I don't want to miss anybody. But y'all in the Carolinas, y'all down in Atlanta, you know who you are. I love y'all. When when we're mentored, or in my case, I've been a mentor, mentoring or coaching someone, we're like, well, what's your mission statement? What's your why? And it usually ends up being really freaking big. I want to make sure that every single kid in the world is literate. That's an amazing statement. Again, I got 2 degrees in journalism. I would back that, maybe financially, but I would certainly support it. Fantastic. So then what happens when every single child in the world, as far as you know, within your scope, can actually read? One of two things happens. Either you pivot to a bigger cost, or it's time to wrap it up. Mission accomplished. I really recently saw the one of the founders, if not the founder of Girls Who Code. I saw her speak at TED several years ago. Amazing speaker, and of course, she's spoken up about equity at home, which I definitely respect as a stay-at-home dad. It's like let's talk about it. As far as valuing the emotional labor that goes into people who are launching businesses like myself and doing all these things, and also taking care of the home front. Anyway, she was quoted recently as saying, "Yes, I launch Girls Who Code, but I realized that boys need to code too. They're kind of lost in the sauce, as they say." That's a perfect example. I know a lot of women who code, and even some girls who code. Shout out to y'all. But boys who code, when I was growing up, see the gray hair, I'm middle aged. There was a lot of boys that coded, and some girls, but mostly boys. Now we're kind of dealing with the opposite thing. So even in her scope, and I think she's moved on. She might have sold it, but I know there's another woman at the helm who's killing it, who's doing great. But even she, as a former founder, is like having that perspective. So number one, the job could be completed. Number two, you could be done. You could be done. You're like, all right, I'm tired of doing this. Now we talk about in recent years like quiet quitting and I'll move on to this and that, and then fine. If it's on a personal level and you're within a job environment, okay. Then I've done other shows about that. It's Bring Your Worth TV. You can do a search on that. Bring Your Worth TV. There's plenty of episodes about how to leave your job and when to quit. But sometimes you're done and it's actually your baby. You're the you're the masthead, not figurehead, but you're the masthead. You are representing that. If I decided to stop doing Bring Your Worth TV, and I'm the only one that appears on Bring Your Worth TV, there's some tough decisions to make. Maybe not so tough, but definitely a decision to make. So it's not a matter of your heart being in it every single day, but do you feel like that you personally either accomplish what you meant to accomplish, or you personally aren't invested anymore? Like the proverbial, and I talked about this earlier in the episode, like the proverbial restaurant where a local's like, oh yeah, that place used to be amazing. But then something happened a few years ago and it's not hitting like it used to. I wouldn't go over there. So if your heart's not in it or you don't want to do it anymore, as customers, as community, we're going to figure it out. And that finally leads to number three. The community is done. They don't need it anymore. If your main objective or whatever you're creating doesn't fulfill a need in the community anymore, maybe because you were so successful, so be it. A simple example would be back, I don't have my phone with me, but back when the smartphones first launched, the iPhone and other ones, there was no flashlight feature. There was no light, right? Talking first generation. I was in line for the first iPhone back in, what was that, 2007, I think? I think it's 2007. Yeah, it's 2007. I was in line up in Palo Alto, saw Steve Jobs come in, like that kind of thing. I remember having that brick of a phone that cost umpteen dollars. I think it was $500. Barely had a cell plan and barely any reception, and it had no flashlight feature. When the App Store launched about a year and a half later, and at that time I lived in San Francisco. Remember when the App Store launched? One of the first apps was an app that you can get that put a flashlight on your phone. And I think it might have cost $1 or $2. Best selling app for probably a year until obviously the iPhone 2 or the iPhone 3, where they had the flashlight built in. Do you think that community that was paying $1 or $2 for this flashlight, you think they were still buying the flashlight? No. Suddenly they weren't on the charts anymore, unless you happen to have an older iPhone that didn't have one. But then that's a natural atrophy. That's a natural attrition. They both work, but you hear what I'm trying to say. A natural attrition. The community doesn't need it anymore. It's like, dude, we don't need a flashlight anymore. Why would I pay $2 for this when I get it with my already expensive phone? So sometimes the community moves on, and it's time to exit. And it's like this business does not make any sense anymore. As I talk about in today's newsletter at joindamon.me, again, when it's time to exit the business. It's important that we're honest with ourselves as far as when the job is done, mission accomplished. When we are done, our heart, our soul, our mind, even our skill level isn't in it anymore. Or lastly, when the community is done, as in we don't need it anymore. Not from a place of hate or that they don't like you anymore or your product. Just they don't need it anymore. We end up selling Cutler, and at the same time, we sold it a few years before the pandemic hit. Can you imagine people being excited to cuddle while we're in the midst of the pandemic? Now it's a different discussion. Sometimes the community doesn't need it anymore. Sometimes the mission is accomplished. Sometimes you don't need to do it anymore. The more honest you are with that, the clearer it'll be to listen to your intuition to know when to get out of your business. If we're talking business, we we got to talk about lawyers. We have to. We have to. As they say, somebody without a lawyer or some type of legal representation has a fool for a client. I'm being really kind, so I'm trying to keep it PG-13. Just in case my kids watch this later. Do you hear what I'm saying? That saying's a saying for a reason. There's very few situations that I've been in where I haven't gotten some type of advice, particularly in situations that I don't know anything about. LegalZoom, I've used them. They are great. I've used them personally. I've used them to help get this stuff to you. So I can say there's some steps along that way where without LegalZoom, the show will be looking a little bit different right now. They got you covered. And let me go ahead and hop on and so you can see what they got going on. So when I say they got you covered, I mean it. Listen, we'll allow cookies. I swear the cookies are killing me today. Hope you can see it. And not the good kind. All right. Start my business, run my business. Hey, sounds like our series. Protect my brand. Create my will and trust. Hey, got to make sure your stuff is tight. Get attorney guidance and customize legal contracts. Break it down, et cetera, et cetera. And then let's hop to the good stuff. Business. All right. LLC. Shout out to Two Chains and Larry June. If you know, you know. LLCs, corporations, which are a little bit bigger. A lot of people that I coach are not doing corporations, but are closer to LLCs or DBAs or sole proprietorships. DBAs and sole proprietorships are closer to you're doing an independent hustle and you make sure that you have some type of structure in place so that you can do a better time with your taxes, maybe, and things of that nature. That's one. The LLC is like a step above that, where you're able to have a little bit more distance. But that means you also have separate taxes as well as special fees that are related to that LLC. So it's like a separate entity. And corporation is kind of like big time, where it's like, all right, S corp will be slightly different, but usually C corp corporation, it's like you have employees, capital E. You have an HR department, like you're usually on that level. It's a different type of thing. And as far as trademark, copyright, and so forth, these are things that you want to get into play. The reason I bring this up here is not just because this will help you as far as exiting and understanding your company. It also is the foundational things, as we talked about earlier in the series. It's part of the foundational thing when you start the company. We'll talk about that in the next segment. When you start the company, then you're planting the seeds for your exit. Doesn't matter if you're going to sell or not, but you're planting the seeds for that exit. The more you set up that foundation, the easier you can handle any transition that comes through. Special deal with LegalZoom, so you guys will get a discount if you end up getting it through me. Check them out. I think they have their own recent coupons too that have been spectacular. I'm a coupon guy, so use the coupons. Do your thing. It's a beautiful thing. Okay. LegalZoom is a great place to start, particularly if you don't have your own lawyer. I have a couple lawyers that I work with. One in particular, you know who you are. I appreciate you. Um, but if you're not in that position, that's cool too. And LegalZoom can do that, what I would call the a la carte service, not service, service. My favorite episode that I've been highlighting throughout this particular series is get better contracts and protect your intellectual property rights. Such a key part of it to understand your contracts as well as understand what intellectual property is. We highlighted this. I never know the past tense of this. We highlighted it. Oh, we'll do that. We highlighted it in recent episodes. This takes that episode as well as other episodes. Be sure and check it out. It's a nice comprehensive guide, and hopefully it'll get you to where you need to be. If you can probably tell, I am not a lawyer, but I work with contracts a lot, and I know how to CYA. Hopefully in a way that is that is helpful to y'all, and hopefully in the long term will be helpful to my business. So what about y'all? Are you working with a business now that you feel like it's time to wrap it up? Are you confused? Are you not sure if it's you that are done, if it's the business that's done, or if it's the community that doesn't want it anymore? Jump in the comments. Let me know. I'm curious about that. Again, I've been in your situation. If not in your exact situation, some similar stuff. And there's no clear cut answer to that. My biggest concern is to make sure that your timing is right, because your timing as far as when you exit could be the difference between getting a little bit of money for your company or getting a lot of money for your company. Again, with Cutler, if we had went ahead and kept doing the business, once the pandemic hit, which was only a few years after we were at our peak, if the pandemic hit, Cutler would have a very different story before it was acquired from another company. So something to think about for sure. I'm entrepreneur coach Damon Brown, here to help you as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. You're watching Bring Your Worth TV Wednesdays, 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. You can subscribe for free.